I am the founder of Missoula. I'm Christopher P. Higgins. Yep, Higgins Avenue. Are you familiar with the university section?
Somewhat.
Then you are familiar with the names of 9 of my children. I had 9 kids, and they're all immortalized with the names of the streets in the university section. Helen, Hilda, Ronald, Gerald, etc. In fact, you may not be familiar with some of them because the university took those streets. For example, Francis, or Frank, was my eldest son, and his street would have been the one right up against the mountain, but because of the university, never happened. But if you look at some of the early plats of the town, plats that I myself drew up, all the children would have been immortalized.
Well, that was close to the Prescott mansion, right?
That was close to the Prescott, yes. Yep. But that came later. I was born in 1830 in Ireland, and as part of the potato famine and the troubles in Ireland, my family moved to Michigan in 1848, excuse me. In 1853, Governor Isaac Stevens of the new Washington Territory recruited me to be a wagon boss. And by 1855, I was a captain. So Captain C.P. Higgins, preferred to be referred to as the captain. Are you familiar with Council Groves?
Yes.
Okay, well, Council Groves. Council Grove, the state park down there, is where we made the treaty. We were involved in that, the governor and I. In fact, I saved the governor's life on his way to Council Grove. We were going up the river, and we were using poles on big, cumbersome rafts. There were 3 rafts. The first 2 of them were doing fine. Governor and I were on the last one. It was the most cumbersome, and it lost control. Went into heavy water, rapids, and in order to save the governor and the raft, I grabbed one of the ropes out of it, jumped into the river, swam ashore, ran alongside the raft until I could tie it onto a tree, saved the governor's life. But it was also, I only stayed in the Army a couple years after that because while in this area, I recognized the commercial economic possibilities that was out here. The Mullen Road had just been completed, going east to west from Fort Benton to Walla Walla. And you had a trail that went from the Jocko Valley, where the reservation was located, to the Bitterroot. So that's kind of the northwest. So there's a natural crossroads there. So in 1860, I resigned from the Army, and I bought out the Isaac interest of the Isaac and Warden store in Walla Walla, convinced Mr. Warden, whose ancestors over there somewhere, to move out here. We packed up 76 animals, moved and established the very first structure out at Hellgate, which is about, you know where the new Walmart is? Yeah. Out that way.
6 miles or so.
Well, it's not that far. It's only a couple miles from the Walmart. It's about 6 miles from downtown. Yeah. But by 1863, we had decided to build a grist mill and a sawmill, and there was not enough motive power out there. Grant Creek, not really sufficient. So we moved down to where Rattlesnake comes into the Clark Fork. And that's where we built our first grist mill. And within 3-4 years, Hellgate Village more or less disappeared as everyone moved to what we called Missoula Mills. And I am very upset with the town fathers afterwards that they allowed the name to be shortened. In fact, I am about to launch a campaign to rename it Missoula Mills. So I think that is a much more appropriate name.
This is where the Rattlesnake joined the Clark Fork?
It would have been a little bit south. What we did is we had slewways from there. It's more, this first sawmill is more where the Children's Theater used to be, that small building there, and kind of where the Holiday Inn's located. That would be the area. Because there was also an island, Sleevens Island, that was later filled in part of it, where the Wilma is. So yeah, it would have been more towards there. So we started that, and Higgins had a lot of firsts. I was the For example, I was the first chief of the volunteer fire department. In fact, our very first horse-drawn hose wheel was called the CP Higgins. Very, very proud of that. Very proud of that, I must say. But I was president of the first bank, and unfortunately, Mr. Bonner and his friends, if you will, came to town in 1866 with a lot of money, a lot of connections, connected with Daly, Marcus Daly, and soon bought me out of my bank. And I was in the process in 1889 of building a new bank. You know where the Sterling Bank is downtown?
Yep.
That was the Higgins Bank. And I was going home one afternoon and died there in the street of a heart attack. I blame it all on Mr. Bonner.
What did you call the first bank?
It was the First Montana Bank.
Oh.
Yep, and then Bonner took it over, renamed it, and just don't like to talk about it anymore. And are you familiar with the slant streets across the...
Yeah, I live there, yeah.
Ah, well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I am partly responsible for that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it was... I'm not the one with the slant street. That was Bickford and Stevens.
Yeah,
They wanted that.
that was their fault, yeah.
That was their fault. But Judge Knowles and I more or less put our foot down to that. We felt that it was inappropriate to have streets laid against section lines. You know, it needs to be north, south, east, west. None of these crazy slants. You know, Stevens and Bickford cited, of course, the fact that the main road from downtown, crossing the Higgins Bridge, went diagonally to the fort and then out the Bitterroot. So it would make sense, they felt, to be able to, you know, lay streets parallel to that. Well, the judge and I nixed that idea in our territory, our land south of the river. And when the Higgins Street Bridge was flooded away, we decided we would build it perpendicular. And the citizens of Missoula voted in favor of that. It was actually to a public vote. But the Higgins were always a very, very popular family in town, unlike the Bonners.
And the Bonner stone is over there someplace.
It's that big fancy one over there.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, very, very unhappy with that close proximity.
Did you keep up your Irish heritage in any way while you were in town?
No, not really. No, the activities involved, you know, the banking, the first commissioner, one of the first 3 commissioners, prospecting, running couple stores, the bank, Masons, the master of the Masons for 7 years. So those are the types of activities. Hired the first teacher. I don't know if you've met Emma Slack yet, but I hired her. Yeah, so a lot of things. And I say nine children. And the Higgins record after myself is not sterling. They went through my money rapidly. And not much is left, and there are very few Higgins descendants. Most of the children died without issue. So there's a Grant who would have been a grandson. There's also a granddaughter who is one of my daughters, Hilda, married the warden at Deer Lodge. Conlon, I believe is the name. And so CP did have a granddaughter. But one son, Morris, and it's pronounced Morris, it's spelled Maurice, but it's pronounced Morris, was murdered. About 3 years after CP Higgins died, there was a big fire in town. It started behind the Blue Front bar. And personally, I think Mary Gleim had something to do with it, but we're not sure.
Where was the Blue Front bar?
It's on Front Street. So it was right in Mary's area.
Okay.
But what happened was that Morris was out helping fight the fire. But in the meantime, these two men, Lyons and Burns, were out drinking heavily. Another man by the name of Goldenbogen accused Lyons of stealing his watch. So the sheriff came, arrested Lyons. Burns took exception to this, challenged Goldenbogen to a duel, and the idiot accepted. And they went behind a bar, paced off, shot. Well, Morris, walking by, turns around to see what the heck was the noise, and at that point, Burns takes another shot at Goldenbogen. Apparently he's not a good shot, because missed Goldenbogen and hits Morris right in the head. Morris never does recover consciousness, and because the Higgins were so well loved, the community was ready to lynch Burns. But the sheriff prevented that from happening. Instead, we hung him legally 3 months later. So he did get his just desserts.
Quite a story.
Quite the family, quite the family.
Did you take part in any of the philanthropic parts of Missoula?
Very much so, very much so. Did a lot of that. In the early years, it was not so much philanthropic, it's more community, you know, the fire department, things like that, because you didn't have, we weren't established enough. But by the 1870s, 1880s, then yes, was giving a lot to those, you know, support to poor houses, things like that. Mary Gleim, I don't know if you've been to Mary's yet.
We have. Yeah.
She started in 1889, so I like to think her arrival probably helped drive CP to the grave. It's just not what I would have had in mind for Missoula. So I think between Mary Gleim and Mr. Bonner, I think it done him in.